Today is the 15th of May. 77 years ago, in 1948, the Nakba took place. This was a historic event. The mass expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The day before, May 14th, 1948, was the creation of this settler colonial project. The Zionist regime came to birth on that day. On the very next day, it killed thousands of Palestinians, stole their land, and started a campaign of terror which went on for a long time. During this period, Palestinians were killed, raped, tortured, taken away from their motherland. Now, these particular crimes are well documented. However, in 1948, there was no social media. There was no Facebook. There was no Twitter. There was no Instagram. There was no way of recording these crimes in detail. The scattered footage that we have is truly awful. The level of pain and suffering inflicted upon the Palestinian population 77 years ago was unprecedented. However, the mass displacement continued over the years, and we've seen recently with the genocide taking place in Gaza that Israel is continuing in its historical roots of terror. Something important to keep in mind, because I've been watching the Israelis, and not just average Israelis that you bump into in Speaker's Corner or other places, but their actual spokesman on Sky News in an interview. He was continuously justifying the attack that was taking place in Gaza in regards to the ambulance workers that were killed, and everything boiled down to one simple brute logic that Israelis have been using, which is they are claiming that Hamas is using civilian ambulances and they're using civilian structures. They use that as an excuse to kill all Palestinians in Gaza. So it's okay from their logic, because as long as Hamas supposedly is using civilians as shields, they can go ahead and kill civilians. Just think about that for a second. Imagine there is someone who's taken someone else hostage. There's a robber who's taken someone else hostage. And again, these are just Israeli claims, but let's just play with them. A robber has taken someone hostage, and what the sniper does, the police sniper does, is there's a showdown, it's live on TV, and that sniper decides to shoot directly and kill the child or the elderly person or whoever's being held hostage, in order to basically justify their actions. They say, well, that child was being used as a human shield, so I had to kill that child, I had to kill the elderly person. And then the sniper actually starts shooting the windows and the cars of the local area, because he starts saying, well, all of these people potentially could be human shields as well, even though those people are walking around on their own. Because so much footage we have of this Gaza genocide, which has been live streamed, where Palestinians are just going about their own business, just in a street on their own or whatever, all different ages, all different backgrounds, and they're just being mercilessly killed and butchered in the most inhumane way. So to truly understand this terrorist state of Israel, you have to go back to the Nakba. Now, in the comments, I'm actually going to be leaving a website, the BDS movement. There are 7 things there for you to read up about the Nakba, and there's 7 demands of the BDS to the international community. So this is something I want everyone to look up. We need to understand the Nakba in order for us to understand the current mindset of the Zionist regime. The Nakba is an important historical episode which we need to study, which we need to decipher, which we need to learn from, because if we do not learn from history, then history will repeat itself. To understand the brutality and the inhumane nature of this Zionist regime, you have to look at their forefathers. You have to look at their grandfathers rather, not their forefathers, their grandfathers, because it's very recent. And the actions that they took in Palestine, and let me be very clear because this is another point of confusion. People, they go back to the UN resolution where certain parts were supposed to be Palestine and certain parts were supposed to be Israel. No, it is all Palestine. From the river to the sea, it is all Palestine. All of the people there, whether they are Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Druze, whatever they are, they're welcome as they were before to live in peace and harmony. What you don't do, and this is why the two-state solution makes no sense. What you don't do is, say in this particular case, the British took over and then they handed over to the UN and then the UN made this decision, right? Forget that. Think of this analogy in a different way. Think of your house being taken over by a third party. And the third party then has supposed rights to stay in that area because they were supposed to be there 2,000 years ago, whatever it is. And now you are forced to share the house. And even the sharing that they wanted to do in the beginning, they're taking over other rooms, and they're taking over the living room, they're taking over everything and just leaving you in one corner of the house. And even there, they're butchering and killing you and your family. The thing is, the two-state solution was never going to work because you are basically letting a genocidal maniac regime share resources with people that don't have weapons, that don't have resources, that don't have any of these things. Because in 1948, the British left behind weapons, and those weapons were picked up by the Zionists. So the Zionists, in a classical playbook of colonial history, they are wiping out the indigenous people. And you know what's so strange about this particular claim that they have to the land? Even according to their own history, they weren't the first settlers there. It was actually others, and they took over from those Canaanites. So don't Canaanites have rights over Israel in this case? And in fact, why don't we do a widespread DNA test to see who is actually European and who's actually from this area? Why is it that the Zionists don't want any of this to happen? The reason is simple. The reason is they have no claim to the land. They are European Zionist settlers that came straight into a colonial power's pocket, and they helped the colonial power in terms of the way that it wanted to divide up the place. And they've been working with the British. So it's not simply a case where, oh, the British were being fair. And no, the British were occupiers, and they handed over to another occupier, which is the Zionist regime in this particular case. Now, another thing I do want to mention when it comes to the history of the Nakba, the Muslims, the Palestinians, and there's obviously Palestinian Christians as well. I just want to mention something very important. There's Palestinian Jews as well. And those Jews were living peacefully before the Zionist regime took over. And in fact, it was the Muslims that allowed the Jewish people to live in Palestine for hundreds of years. They were persecuted before the Muslims came. And another historical episode is very important. What happened in Andalusia when the conquistadors, when the Christians came back to power and they expelled the Muslims. And you actually had the Jews alongside the Muslims moving out to the Muslim lands, because the Muslims and the Jews both were coexisting. What you had in Europe in terms of the total discrimination of the Jewish people, the slaughter of the Jewish people during the 20th century, what was happening to them in Russia as well in the 19th century and the 20th century, all of this stuff, you don't have that in the Islamic world. So I want to make it very clear, because the Zionist regime wants to make it into wants to have this particular picture that it's all about the Zionists representing the rights of the Jewish people, and therefore all Jewish people should be supporting the Zionists. No, that's not true at all. It's never been true. In fact, even today with all of their propaganda, some of the biggest voices for the Palestinians are actually of Jewish ancestry. Finkelstein, very important figure politically, very staunch anti-Zionist, very staunch anti-Israeli. He himself is from a Jewish background. Dave Smith, who debated Douglas Murray, he's also from a Jewish background. So this isn't a Jewish thing. This is to do with the Zionist criminal regime. And we need to call it out for what it is. It is an apartheid regime. It is a genocidal regime. And we will not stop. We will not stop talking about the Nakba. We will not stop talking about the hundreds of thousands of people that were expelled. We will not stop talking about the mass murder of the Palestinians. And what's been happening since the Nakba till today is one series of murders after another, one series of oppression after another, one series of total annihilation of the Palestinian culture in areas of Palestine after another. Because you see on the map, you see it spreading, you see the Zionist regime taking over Arab towns and calling them with other names. So I hope in this video you've been intrigued to look into the history of the Nakba. Please check out the website in the comment below. Don't start, in the comment section just arguing about, this happened or that happened. Today is a day in which we need to just focus on the history, because sometimes what happens is we get enticed into having these debates with Zionists in the comment section where, Hamas did this and PLO did this or whatever. Ignore all of that. Just stick to the history. To truly understand what's happening today, Hamas is irrelevant from the Nakba perspective. They never existed. Neither did the PLO. Neither did, all these different actors that you see today, Netanyahu and whatnot. But just look at the history of the Nakba. Look at what they did. Once you understand that, you will see this genocide that we're seeing in Gaza today is simply the Nakba repeating itself, except this time Israel has the most sophisticated weapons, and it has these weapons from who? From the Europeans, from the Americans, from many different parts of the world. Yet, despite all of this, despite them having a total this massive PR juggernaut that they have, and their military apparatus, and their army, and their navy, and their air force, and their security services, and their intelligence services, and their cyber security services, all of that, despite all of this, people do not believe them. People do not accept their version of the story. People who were pro-Israel turned against them, and people with even the smallest shred of moral compass in their body, they will recognize this is an apartheid regime. This is a genocidal regime. This is a historically cruel regime which will not treat the Palestinians as anything else than subhuman savages. And until and unless this Israeli state is completely dismantled and the state of Palestine from the river to the sea, the entire state is reinstated and with the rights of everybody, including the Muslims and the minorities, there will be no peace in this area. So thank you for watching this video. Do look up the history of the Nakba, and I look forward to seeing your comments about this historical event.